Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, nothing much.
Hey, Saria.
Okay. So we're just gonna start off with intros. Basically, say your name, school, major, year, any interest in like your SOI involvement. So who wants to start?
Robert, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, for sure. So, hey, my name's Robert. I'm a second year student currently studying engineering science at the University of Toronto right now. And I've been involved with SOI since around 2014 when I was on their Antarctic expedition. And then I rejoined SOI in 2016 for their Arctic expedition and had the time of my life both times.
Hi guys, I'm Katya. I'm currently a second year computer science student at the University of Waterloo. I'm also planning to pursue a cognitive science minor. I'm an alumnus of the SOI 2016 Arctic expedition, and yeah, I had an amazing time. So grateful that I had the opportunity to go.
Oh, hey guys. You guys probably know me from the intro, but I'm Surya, second year student at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Planning to do cognitive psychology with a minor maybe in informatics, CS, or art and design. Yeah, my like interests are all over the place, but mainly I think a lot of this podcast encompasses what like I'm really passionate about and interested in. And what was the final question? Oh yeah, my SOI involvement. Went on the 2016 SOI expedition to the Arctic. It was super eye-opening and inspiring. Gotta say that. I think about like almost every day. That's all I could say about it, to say the least. Yeah. So do you guys want to kick this podcast off with the first question? So if you guys
Yeah.
like to just like recap, so this podcast it's in three parts, with the first being new media. This like three main areas we're going to be focusing on is the first being new media, the second being product design, the third being artificial intelligence. So the first part we're going to go with is new media. And so our like main question for that is based off of like a lot of what we saw on the SOI Arctic trip was focused on mainly this area. So we're going to be being focused on what one specific area called cultural mapping, which I like. Do you guys have personal experience with cultural mapping, or is it like something you just like know about?
I've seen a lot of cultural mapping like in the news and popular media, but I don't think I've ever experienced it firsthand.
Yeah, I
What
think my experiences extend to like seeing VR and just like all those 3D videos, sort of going over really cool landscapes in remote areas of the world. That's the extent of my experience.
Yeah, so like the question we had was, how can cultural mapping be enhanced by technology to help cultural relativity? So let's like kind of take a step back. What do you guys define new media as before we answer this question?
I guess for me, new media would really be defined as anything which leads to total immersion in the environments that we're trying to experience as media consumers. Like, in the past, you'd sit in front of a TV, you'd sit in front of a radio, you've had like one of your senses stimulated or two of your senses stimulated. You have like information being kind of told to you. But with new media, it's a little bit of a paradigm shift because all of a sudden we're fully immersed in the content that we're absorbing. It's not just a matter of like sitting and watching as an outside spectator. You're like truly fully in the middle of it, and that's what I think really differentiates that from everything we've had in the past.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, Robert. It's a lot about immersing yourself into the media now, pouring who you are into it rather than just being a passive consumer that's just observing. You're more engaged in the experience.
Yeah, I think personally for me, I think a lot of like what strikes me as media is like information transmission. And so like new media is kind of like building off of that and like the new technologies that we use to transmit information. So a lot of like social media and then like web news is like what I consider to be new media. And like I think a lot of like what Katya mentioned before, like the kind of like what we saw in the Arctic with like the 360 and like what Robert to an extent mentioned, like the 360 cameras, the drone footage, and like all sort of that, like all sorts of like new technologies that are coming out like right now are helping like adding on to this like new like sense of immersion that that's really striking. Yeah.
For sure. And I really also like, Surya, how you define social media as part of this new media, because I think that that's an incredibly important part of this new immersion, the fact that in real time with real people from across the world, we're able to, have conversation and talk about the issues that are being presented in a way that might not have been able to be possible like 20 or 30 years ago. So that social media integration of everyone's perspective into an event as it's happening is like absolutely huge.
Yeah, I think like Snapchat is starting to become like I think that's where their game plan is going on. I think they're trying to like get more immersive in the way that like they spread news. So like you could like do you guys watch basketball?
Oh yeah.
Do you know
Not
Gordon
much.
Hayward? Like the way I found out about Gordon Hayward getting injured was on like Snapchat because like one of my friends posted it, and then, like right after that, like literally on the feed for that game. So like Snapchat has feeds for various kinds of basketball, baseball, football games, at least here in the States. And like literally they posted that like literally like right when he got injured. So it was like pretty crazy to see that. And like right after that, like I started like a lot of my day was spent on like learning about that. I'm like super into sports personally, but yeah. So I think so we got a kind of new like understanding of what new media is. So let's start delving into these main questions. Sub questions. So what do you guys think is the internet and social media's role in climate change? Like how does it affect climate change, and like what does climate change do to like new media? How does that whole like dynamic work?
I think that that social media definitely plays a huge role in the public's awareness of climate change issues, especially when you look at sites, some petition sites that bring up specific issues that are occurring in the Arctic or in other areas of the world. It gets a lot of people, it garners a lot of support. It's easy to kind of get like that snowballing effect where a lot of people are pouring support out for a specific cause and making their friends aware of it and that kind of stuff. And it's a really great platform to crowdfund, so to say, a certain issue that you might want to make aware to the public.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And in addition, I would say what's the real power of the new media when talking about sustainability, climate change, and getting young people involved in dealing with climate change is the fact that it is so immersive. And in my opinion, like bringing this back to SOI, that's one of their big like selling points, right? Like you don't really feel the polar regions or the environment in any part of the world until it touches you in the heart. And you can do that by physically going to the place, which is one way, but there are other better ways to do it, which is through this digital world. And new media presents, through the VR, augmented reality, social media, all these different sources of information that we can take in and incorporate so that, we really empathize with these stories that are happening all across the world. We empathize with our climate, and then we can do something to take action for it.
Katya, you had a good point about Google. You want to say that again on the actual podcast? Because I thought that was, at least for me, that was like a really important point to bring up.
Yeah, sure. So you're referring to the echo chamber sort of discussion we're having, right?
Let me give some background. So if you guys don't know yet, the echo chamber, I think like it started to become like this important word, at least in the whole like Google fiasco, like issue, I guess we'll just like call it issue, where this guy was talking about how like Google was an echo chamber, like where, like the other side of like views don't get heard often because it's like an echo chamber basically where like what you like send, like the ideas that you send out just like come back to you, I guess. That's the idea of an echo chamber. So do you want to build off of that?
Yeah, sure. So echo chambers are just, it's, they kind of provide a area for people who support a certain topic to get approval from people who agree. So it's like, it's less so an agent for making people more aware of issues and more so just like making yourself feel good about your opinion. And you can definitely see that in, like for example, let's take an argument you're having, maybe a friendly discussion you're having with a peer about some sort of something that you can find an answer on Google for. And it's interesting because you can research your own opinion on the argument.
Wait, Robert, did she cut or?
She cut.
Okay. But so basically what I think she was going after was how Google, like when you type a Google search query, it basically just comes back to you. Like it basically gives you this confirmation bias, is like Robert was talking, like we were talking about this before. It was like one of the most like more interesting points that we were like testing out with. But basically what you like search, or like what you kind of want to find, is just like confirmation about like what your thoughts are. Just like, I think it's more of like a social psychology thing, where like you want to make sure that your ideas are stable, and like it's like what you're doing, like it's set in tone like with what you think and like what you put out there in the real world. So like when you search a Google query, you want to make sure that like what you think is right. So you like search in that kind of terms. I think that was what she was basically going off of.
Yeah.
Oh wait, Kathy, are you back on?
Back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Sorry about that. I just wanted to know if you guys had any thoughts on how to reduce the sort of echo chamber effect or the confirmation bias effect that you can get from Google searches.
Yeah, one of the ways we could definitely start to go about that is, at the fundamental level, the level of education, maybe starting to think along the lines of how can we educate people to know that, their opinion may not always be the correct opinion. And that really starts with, getting rid of a culture of failure and fear. We don't have to be worried about being wrong. Being wrong isn't a problem, right? In fact, it's fantastic when we're wrong, because when we're wrong, that means that we learn. And if we start with that, maybe people wouldn't be so close-minded towards saying, I'm just going to go on this one Google search, look at all these opinions that happen to confirm mine, and therefore show I'm right. Maybe people will actually say, maybe I am wrong. Let's go take a look at things that say I'm wrong. And then at the end of that, whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't really matter, because you've had a good discussion about it and you fully understand the points of your position. So I mean, it's that education which is really, really crucial for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like the education aspect of it is super important. I think education in general is like becoming really, really important. Like that's the area that like a lot of people are focusing their times on, in like at least in this part, like this in our time right now. I think in the future, like in the past, like it's been standard, right? All we do is just go and then sit down like in lecture rooms. But I think definitely with like the tools we have like right now, like especially on YouTube, like I personally watch like crash course videos on like different like areas of interest that I personally have, and I find them really, really like eye-opening and like thought provoking. This personally, like this one personally, at least for me, like there's this one playlist that they created called Big History. It traces like the history of time from like the Big Bang to like right now, and then like the deep future, which is like it's like this whole beast on its own, but it's super cool and interesting, and I'd highly recommend you guys watching it. But on this note, like I think I've seen myself like struggling a lot with this, because I like tend to like a lot of the things that like I conform with, and like I find that is right. Because personally, like I think the other side is like, I don't know about you guys, but like I think a lot of what the other side says is wrong, and it doesn't like fall within like what I believe. So I don't like to hear that. Like I don't like to listen to that. I like to just focus on, like I completely ignore that, which is I don't think it's a good thing personally, but I just focus on what I like to do and what I want to be informed about. So I think that's something at least I'll like take away, and after this podcast probably change.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking that some echo chambers might be beneficial if we penetrated them, in terms of there might be some groups of people who echo negative ideas about climate change, sort of just uninformed, very biased opinions. And as much as we want to support people who have different opinions from our own, how would you guys approach like introducing sort of telling those people about the knowledge that we have about climate change? If that makes sense.
Can you put that like that? I think I was kind of like getting what you're getting at, but like, can you put that like in layman's term in a sentence, please?
Yeah, sure. So just, I guess going off of the echo chamber, more back to the climate change discussion we were having, how would we eliminate echo chambers to spread ideas about climate change that we know to be true?
I think having open like forum discussions on like Facebook. I think Mark Zuckerberg touched upon this. Like I think he this is like almost his like business, right? Like his business is built upon like having people interact. So I think like one way about going about it, like I think he talked about like building communities, and so having like open like groups of like various kinds of interests coming together and like discussing issues and like discussing what they think is important and what they want to bring to the table. Having that like open like platform, that community is super important to discuss and like to get educated about various people's viewpoints is I think where like a lot of like how we're trying to alleviate this problem is going.
For sure. And encouraging that approach, especially to the other alternative, which I mean, it sometimes seems very tempting, which is when, people who do have information about climate change say, maybe we should create our own positive echo chambers for climate change, right? And then this way we can get a whole bunch of people reinforcing the results we know to be true and bringing it up that way. And while that may be effective, it might not be sustainable in the long run because people, just like people are getting caught up in the negative echo chambers, people might get caught up in the positive echo chambers without really knowing why. Which is why that sort of like reasoned, informed discussions where we all come to a consensus based on rational conclusions is the only really sustainable way to have people truly buy in to preserving our planet for like the indefinite future.
I think on a like political standpoint, building off of that, like talking to representatives who don't really align with like what you believe is super important because I think at least from like a youth standpoint, I think a lot of youth like tend to look at the like they tend to have interactions with like the politicians and the kind of influentials that they know like conform with their like identities and their beliefs. So I think it's important to like view the other side, flip side of it, and see like what other influential people who have different opinions and beliefs than me are talking about and like their rationality behind it. Right. I think that's like another like important way about going about it.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the USA, you kind of see this a lot with the Bernie Sanders effect. I mean, like nothing against Bernie Sanders. I think he's a fantastic politician. In fact, I'm hoping to see him when he comes to Toronto in a month or so. But getting caught up in the Bernie Sanders hype, maybe not the best idea. I mean, I think there are many Republican individuals, senators, congressmen, bounded by the rules of reason who have differing opinions. And whether or not we agree with those opinions, it's our responsibility to go and hear them out. I think Voltaire once said that I may not agree with your opinion, but I will defend to death your right to say it. And it's that sort of attitude we need to foster an open discussion. And in that, we hope that irrationality or arguments that just don't have any logical backing can hopefully be like weeded out and destroyed.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that there's definitely like rationality and like reasoning behind everyone's kind of viewpoints. So it's important to see that. I think that's the baseline.
Yeah, I liked your points area about.
I feel like guarantee you there are probably like a few of them definitely that like have reasons for why they support fossil fuels, and it makes a lot of sense. But sometimes that gets overlooked. That's at least that's what I've seen in the States. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like your points area about actually contacting the people who are representing you in different levels of government, because really that is their job to represent the views of the people who fall under their government. So making them aware of how you feel about an issue is invaluable.
Quick put in. I think so we spent like 10 minutes on this single question, but Facebook, I think they have like this new feature. Like I think they implemented it in 2016 when we had the American like presidential election. But you could go see like you could go to various like politicians and then see what kind of ideologies they have and like what kind of policies they support. So I think that's like a cool thing that they implemented for that election. So if you're interested, you can check it out. But I think we'll move on to the next question we have. So 360 cameras, drones, and cultural mapping. What do you guys think? And for like some background, we saw a lot of we saw the first two things a lot in SOI, and then cultural mapping was something that Nick, who's a part of SOI now, like working for SOI on new media, brought up to me, and I thought it was like super interesting. I took an anthropology class, and so this is how I'm coming from it. But to give like a basic definition, culture is basically cognition, what we think, behavior, like how we act basically in certain situations, and then how we act with people, and then artifacts, which is basically like iPads, and then like mics, and then computers, basically anything that humankind has created. So like, what do you guys want to talk about in that?
So I think if anyone's listening to this and hasn't seen the SOI videos from from any year, but I mean, especially from seeing videos, the ones that well, that at least I'm familiar with. There's a lot of shots of the places we were at, and like even while we were there, we didn't see these perspectives. Like it's literally you're seeing everything from a different perspective. You're kind of it puts everyone who was on the expedition in a more holistic perspective, more like integrated with the environment that they're around. I would check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah, for sure. And that becomes very relevant to cultural mapping as well, because like as you said, there's so many new perspectives here. And then the hope is, can we take some of these new perspectives and use these new perspectives to shine light on old ways of doing things or old traditions, and maybe make them more relevant or express them in a different way, such that an audience of individuals who may not be familiar with all the context and the rituals that happen in the particular circumstance of people in the North or people in other cultures might be able to sort of empathize with them and understand them from a perspective of technology and new innovation that's like more accessible.
Yeah, I think you hit it, Robert. But building off of that, I think like environmental like livelihood is super dependent on like your culture, and whether your culture like is successfully like carried out by one generation after another. But I think like cultural mapping has like this huge capability of like allowing us to store like various cultures and how they adapted to the environments in like technology, right? So I think that it's like super helpful from that perspective. And then I think like 360 cameras and drones just like take that whole like cultural mapping to like a whole nother level. So how I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, especially as we see more cultures dying on planet Earth, right? Like, I forget the study, but something like 4 languages die every year on planet Earth, and we're seeing the reduction of culture. Unless people are alive to tell these stories, it just becomes that much more important that we capture these stories in technology so that we can continue to learn from them in the future and hopefully use them to guide our conservation efforts right now. Sorry.
Robert, that's exactly the point that I wanted to bring up, the whole dying of languages. And sorry, I think we were having a discussion a few weeks ago. Yeah. Do you want to expand on that?
We're going to talk a lot about this later on, but good thought. Like, what, you guys have any other like final thoughts? Keep that in mind. Just like keep that in mind. Trust me. But yeah, do you guys have any other like? I think drone footage is becoming super popular. Do you guys know Casey Neistat? Like I think Katya, we talked about this in the expedition, but like this guy is like so amazing. I love him. But he uses a lot of drone footage. I feel like he's one of the main like proponents of like people like even my old high school, like they have like drone footage now for their YouTube videos, which I thought was like pretty cool. But yeah, it was like pretty interesting. And like so we have like a campaign going on our campus, and they have like a lot of drone footage for that as well. So I think like definitely drone footage is like taking off. And like another thing about drones, like it's like I went to like this, Katya told this to you before. We talked about this before, sorry. But I went to this event at SF for like this microchip and solar kind of conference thing. And like one of the things there was like DJI was showing off, like showcasing this like higher level drone that could like do mapping and then do mapping for agriculture and like show like what places like I think yield the best crops and like what places are good places to like plant and do agriculture, which I thought was like super. It was a super cool application of drones. Definitely, I didn't see it like that for sure.
Yeah, and you have drone technology being used in like different ways, not even necessarily for VR, for making videos, but you can fly drones to deliver packages. You can, I think I forget what company might have been Amazon looking into drone deliveries.
So like Amazon is like honestly like they're killing it all over the place.
Yeah.
Like for college students, like I live off Amazon, and they even started like, this is kind of like going a bit off topic, but like they have like campus stores. Like you guys have that at your campus on your campuses, like where they deliver it over on like one day, which is like crazy.
Wow.
They take one day to literally deliver like whatever you need. So like they're doing some pretty, like all the technology companies that we have like right now, the big companies, like they're like nothing we've seen before. Like I'll just like leave it at that. But you guys have anything else to add on? Or?
Yeah, and just saying about like a lot of these drone related applications, not only for footage but for other stuff, I mean, it's happening, and it's happening very fast. The lab I worked in this summer is very, very much into mobile robotics and artificial intelligence as applied to drones for social applications. And the number of things that they're working on is huge right now. Like there are some research projects that, if successful within the next couple of years, will allow internet access to happen in the most remote parts of the world that are like ravaged by disaster. You can literally send some drones up, and all of a sudden you've got an internet location thing everywhere. We're reaching the point where, you know, actual like musical artistic choreography and stuff like that with drones, which might be perfect for cultural mapping and incorporating, you know, like language and culture into art forms with technology. That's becoming a very common thing as we're able to start controlling 100, 200 of these with just the push of a button. There's all these applications that are happening right now in academia and industry coming together. And in the next 5, 10 years, I'm really excited to start seeing these things everywhere in our lives.
Yeah, that's super cool. So this is actually really, like, I just realized it, but 360 cameras is a really good lead into our next question, which is, why is virtual reality and augmented reality in the buzz right now? So like, I think a lot of like, definitely Google, Apple, and Facebook have touched up on like either virtual reality, augmented reality, or both. So like, why do you guys think that's like such a big deal right now? And this ties in with 360 cameras too. So like I recall like one of the videos that was done by SOI was actually a VR, kind of like if you use Google Cardboard, you could like look at 360, like look at a 360 video basically, which I thought was like pretty cool. So
yeah, VR and AR in the buzz right now, really, because you just kind of like, in my opinion, for many of the same reasons as new media, which is you're getting that full immersion in, you know, our world and the technology and things which surround us. And that full immersion has so many benefits because we're no longer spectators in the media we consume and the things we look at. We're actually there. And like that lived experiential learning that we can now get through media is translatable in a whole bunch of fields and can lead to exponential new knowledge that we couldn't have had through traditional methods 15 or so years ago.
And it's pretty cool because I find that, at least from my experience, we went from talking about this as a cool thing to have in the future. We went very, very quickly from that to actually having it used commonplace. Like I have, there's a virtual reality arcade, like maybe 3 minutes down my street. You can, like, Pokemon Go is a very common, very widely known example of augmented reality. And it's just, I find it's cool how integrate things we know from other technologies to create this new technology and just make it useful so quickly. That's why I think it's really taken off, because there's just so much potential.
yeah, I think like they're actually like two different, like I think at least what like I'm sensing is that like there are two different like opinions, like two different directions that companies are taking this. I think Apple is like the most striking. Like I think virtual reality, like I think they're looking at it as a design like obstacle because like it kind of like makes you feel like nauseated, like when you put the headsets on, which it kind of like actually makes sense. I think they're like more focused on like the augmented reality side of things. I think it's like a like added layer of complexity to like our current like user experience that we have with our phones. It's like rather than just using multi-touch, it adds like the sense of like what Robert was touching up on, like a sense of more immersive experience. And I think it also like allows you to like overlay a lot more information in like the context of your environment, which is like super cool.
I was at a hackathon lately where a lot of people were looking into using AR in surgeries, in medical procedures. And it's amazing because it's almost like you're doing an instant X-ray of someone. You can like see inside of them. It's like they're mapping like a typical human body anatomy onto the person, but it's just it's really cool to see how far we can. It's just like giving us more knowledge, about our surroundings.
Yeah, that's super cool. And like also like, wait, do you guys watch the iPhone X ads?
I haven't seen them.
Oh, but it's
No.
all funny. But like, so like the Jonathan Ive, who's like the main designer, he's always like on the videos. But like, so like, do you guys know about the new face recognition feature that the new iPhone X has?
Not much, no.
but I think it relates to augmented reality. I just like lost my train of thought, but basically like if you like move your face, like it like reacts to that, and then like it has like live emojis which like react to like your facial movements, which I thought was like pretty cool. It like adds a layer of like communication, like basically by like moving your face, because there's like lots of like subtle like things that we don't like catch, like what while we're typing we don't like know like what the other people is like their current like emotional state or like their kind of like facial like cues that they give off. And I think like this like whole like the facial recognition part of stuff like adds on to that. Like it adds like another, like as I said earlier, like another level of complexity, which I thought was like pretty cool. And like a good way of like taking, I think they're definitely like pushing that like augmented reality on phones agenda forward, especially off of, like Pokemon, like you guys were talking Pokemon Go. I actually remember there were hella people like when we went on the SOI 2016 expedition. I don't know about you guys, but I saw like when we were at Ottawa, like there were like so many Pokemon Go events. It was hilarious.
Yeah, myself included.
What?
Yeah, I was on that Pokemon Go train.
There was even a Pokemon Go event at the museum where we were at the Natural History Museum, which I thought was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting to see all this taking off and like all the fun we're having with, you know, Pokemon, because that's the best use of augmented reality, along with a lot of other things. But then it also begs the question, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, the fact that as we become more and more absorbed into these technologies, as our reality goes from being not only the reality we see around us, but also the reality in our digital lives, could that potentially be problematic in terms of distracting us from the real world around us? Or is the augmented reality truly augmented in that it's not distracting or, you know, removing us from fully experiencing life as it is, but rather kind of complementing that and allowing us to go further?
I think it really like starts off with the way we design like the systems that we want to put out there, right? So if we like design it to be like a distraction, I feel like a lot of like Snapchat is kind of like this, like the facial, like that whole like augmented reality. Like I had like literally a dancing avocado like one time on my Snapchat, which is like pretty funny. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting question, Robert. I think it's like it's a tough balance between like how much you want to actually invest yourself. Like Sarah was saying, it depends a lot on the design practices as well. But it kind of it's a bit reminiscent of the whole when smartphones were first becoming a thing, and people were questioning, is everyone just going to spend all their time on their smartphones? Are we going to lose out on that human connection that we have right now? I don't think that will be the case. I think we'll find we'll kind of like find ways to integrate it into our lives a bit different or very different from what we're used to right now. But there's it will I feel like it'll be beneficial in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Like hang on, like I'm pretty positive that like at least like the big like companies, I think like they're on the right track in the sense that they're using technology for good, because like they say the double good that comes from being good. So like a lot of them are focused on like the kind of like the contextual environment stuff. So like I think it's like Pokemon Go a lot more focused on that rather than like just like Snapchat kind of filters and stuff like that. So I'm interested how to see it turns out, but I'm not too optimistic about it. I'm not too pessimistic about it. I'm just like in the center. It's like I think it's going to turn out a lot like how smartphones have been used. So like there will be pros and there will be cons to it. Like it'll only like time will tell.
And I think there is a time to fully immerse yourself into VR experiences. Yeah. Like I know the current use case for getting a VR headset is it's not necessarily you walk around with a giant hunk of metal on your head. It's more so you're home alone and you just want to experience something. And staring at a screen, you're immersing yourself into it. You're putting on the headset and you're becoming a part of that reality.
Yeah, I agree. And that's really the power of VR and where we should really be using it the most, in my opinion, because that immersion is what really, you know, creates the passion, creates the motivation, creates all these emotions which are so hard to conjure up, and allows us to channel those to doing good things in the world and getting passionate about the world.
I think that's a really good lead in on to our next question, which is, how could VR be used as a way to spread awareness of Inuit culture to youth in Southern Canada? And this was one of our alumni questions. I'll like introduce like the two alumni who asked questions on our forums. I'll do that. Like I'm not done with the intro yet, but I'll do that in the intro. So yeah. So like one of our alumni asked this question, so thanks to him. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think VR is it's a great way to immerse yourself visually. I don't think it goes far enough to really understand where the Inuit culture is coming from, but it goes a long way from what from the technologies that we had several years ago. So like, I don't, I'm not sure if the 360 videos that Nick took on our expedition that like I would say that's kind of uh, if you were to watch those, you kind of like feel yourself immersed in the area, but maybe not so much the culture to go there.
Well, I'll agree with that, and I'll try to pinpoint the reason potentially for that little bit of a disconnect, which is that for me, culture means fundamentally like interacting with other people, right? Hearing the stories, experiencing the foods, the tastes, the smells. And while we can get that without that human emotional connection, culture isn't really the beautiful thing that culture is. It's just a series of physical artifacts that lack all the humanistic meaning behind it. So, I mean, VR is definitely a step in the right direction. I think it can get us exposed to a lot of stuff that we wouldn't be able to do either. But at the end of the day, like, it's not reality. It's only virtual reality, right?
Yeah, I think like what you guys said was like great points. I think VR, like I think all of these, like all of the stuff we talked about, like VR, AR, cultural mapping, drones, 360 cameras, I think they have to like work, like they're gonna work together in order to like actually like bring in like this immersive like way in which we could like actually spread awareness. I think it's just tough with like just VR. I think that's like too low of a, I guess like bar in order to like spread awareness of like a culture in its fullest form. And I don't think it would do a good job on its in itself of spreading a culture. Like there's like way too many. There's a lot like there's a lot of complexity to cultures that we have to take into consideration when we portray them in order to like get people like. Do you guys know cultural relativism and ethnocentrism? Do you guys know what those two terms mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But for the audience, I guess cultural relativism is like when you see a culture from its like own perspective and you are like in their shoes, and then ethnocentrism is when you look at a culture from your own like perspective and look at it as like something different and like something that doesn't fall with like the way you like the way you're cultured, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good definition.
Yeah.
And
there are a lot of complexities and importance to like when we give.
Yep.
There's a lot of importance that we give to culture, so it's like it's kind of hard.
Yeah,
to
like
do it in one, like, platform.
building on that, I really like the fact that we did bring up ethnocentrism, because for me that would be a really big, not concern, but thing to be cautious about. I would want to incorporate as we're building VR and augmented reality and new media technologies for developing a better understanding of Inuit and indigenous culture. We have to be sure that, you know, as we're developing this media with, you know, technology that was primarily developed by people in the South, we're not imposing our own values or our own biases consciously or unconsciously on these different cultures that we're representing. And I think that comes back to what we were saying earlier, which is that, you know, education and the democratization of these new technologies has to be essential so that they can all be used relatively bias-free to reflect all sorts of social, economic, political, and cultural values.
Rob, just to add on to that, I think coming from a computer science perspective, you're always looking to take a look at the barriers to actually making your technology work in a certain area. So for example, I know from like one of my friends in Labrador lives in a remote area, and her internet connection is quite poor. So something as heavy, as resource heavy as VR or AR might not even be feasible right now.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, we'd have to look at making that network stronger and like more, just making those resources more available to those people. So that's just one example of like kind of things that we might overlook if we don't bring the people that into the discussion.
Yeah. That's key. And one of the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution is that we hope that through all these different technologies that are coming up, you know, like this VR, new media, AI, we can all put those together to develop these technological solutions as quickly as possible to make them accessible and feasible so that like they can be used by everyone and used for good. We're almost in like not a trap, but the situation where, you know, we need more technological development in order to create accessibility for everyone to contribute to technological development.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I think that like leads on to our next question too. I organize these questions in a particular way. So like over time, I think you guys will like understand like the whole like trajectory of stuff. But how can we bridge the digital divide? I think we talked a lot about this. Like, you guys, is it cool if I take a jab at this question first?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of like we talked a lot about this. Definitely like through like AR, VR. That's like a good way about like bridging the digital divide. But I think the key, like the interesting aspect of this is like the inequality created by that, because I think a lot of people go like on Instagram, they like check their feeds and they see like other people like having like a great good life. So like there are like two kinds of digital divides like I think that are forming, and I'm like we're like they're the second one is the one I like more worried about. It's like the first digital divide, like I'm not too sure like what context this question was given in, but like the accessibility to technology. So basically like seniors don't like really understand how to use technology that well, so like they can't access those tools and benefit from it. So like that's like the first kind of like digital divide that we are seeing. The second one I think is more of like it's kind of like a digital like inequality divide, in like which people like of like various like different social classes can see like how other people live their lives, and like that's kind of a huger issue in my perspective. Like what do you guys think?
Yeah, I've heard a lot about people being left behind, feeling like they're being left behind by technology because they don't understand how it works or kind of why it'd be useful to their lives. And I think as we go on, we're gonna get maybe people who are more and more left behind. And then at that point, you want to ask, like, do we want to make accessibility to these resources universal human right? Maybe something akin to like the freedom to access knowledge, just because it's becoming such an important resource for us. How can we allow ourselves to, or how can we allow other people to limit that availability of knowledge?
Robert, do you have any thoughts?
Um, yeah, this is a really tough question because it gets to a lot of the problem where a lot of people will go along and say like our technology is developing too fast. We need to like let social and like political issues like catch up before we start talking again about the technological increases, right? Like, why are we out there developing the newest product when there are still so many people who don't even have access to like the one from 3 generations ago? And it's our responsibility to foster the sense of like like inclusion of everyone. I personally believe that like stuff like high-speed internet access should become a universal human right very, very soon. But there's a part of me that says that the only way we can really get to those situations is not only through social, political, economic influences, but also through increased technology development, right? So like sometimes it might not be possible to create this accessibility until we develop more efficient devices, right? Places are phones and like iPads that can access internet via satellites or via other means that aren't currently available that make, like Wi-Fi access at the North Pole incredibly cheap and strong. And these are all technological developments which need to continue to be fostered and like increased. So in terms of how to balance these two like issues, one is like continuing to create socio-political economic environments that foster equality and sharing of technology, but another is also continuing to push the frontiers so that we can develop new solutions and new ideas, which then can be filtered back into a system where everything is shared equitably. I don't know.
So Robert,
yeah, go for it.
Just to kind of expand on that, are you saying that people who are developing to access that technology and should work together with the people who are actually developing maybe the knowledge or the research? Sorry, how do I say this? Do you mean that we should be working towards a more integrated approach to making this accessible? Is that kind of what you're getting at, or more so that we should, like, one group should take into account the work that another group is doing on this issue?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you were saying more of an integrated approach. Like, we should be, and when I say integrated, I'm defining like the term integrated by saying like making technology accessible to like a wide variety of socio-cultural constructs, and then trying to like involve the general public in the work that a lot of research groups are doing to push the cutting edge. And even though, I mean, part of me does think like it might be unrealistic to say that all 7 billion people have to be at the cutting edge of technology and, you know, researchers working in all these different labs and creating things. But even if that's not possible, the best we can do is try to cycle in those new developments back as quickly as possible and like use developments, which may by their nature have to be a little bit segregated from the general population, take those developments and bring them in as quickly as possible so that we get like the best situation we possibly can get. I don't know if that's feasible or if it might work, but I mean, I think it would be an optimal model.
I think we're going to touch up on like some of the stuff you talked about, definitely the frontiers and moonshot sections. But yeah, this is like something I'm like on a personal level, definitely like it hits hard, like especially like being from like having family in India, and then like at least like I think you guys too, right? Like going on the SOI trip and then seeing how like people live in various parts of the world it strikes you a lot. And then like we're gonna talk about this a bit in a bit. So like globalization too, like it's like it's really complex to say the least. So yeah, the only thing I could say is like time will tell how it goes.
Yeah, good.
So this question is, I think we're going to spend like 1 or 2 minutes only on it. Like experimental use of new media. Do you guys see anything cool with that? I think we talked about this a lot.
Yeah, we've gone through this.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring up is like there's a cool video on YouTube. I talked to you guys about this earlier. So the actor from Game of Thrones, Nikolai, like lost. I don't know how to say his last name. He plays Jaime Lannister, but he took like a camera rig, I think a GoPro camera rig in Greenland, and he basically took like 360 images for Google Maps on Greenland to like spread awareness about climate change in Greenland. So I thought that was like a super cool way of doing it. And then like Google, I think like they bring up a lot of climate change stuff, and Microsoft too. I think like all the tech companies are good about like bringing up climate change, but I think Google had like 2 years ago they talked about like how basically like a lot about what we talked about like VR. They had this whole like expeditions initiative where they give like VR sets to classrooms and then have teachers take their students to various environments through VR, which I like thought was super cool. And there's this whole like rise. I think this whole topic is on like a topic of its own, like just like digital learning, digital literacy. We talked about that like in one of my classes like a week ago, but I missed it because I was at a hackathon. But yeah, like my teacher got like, oh, you'd love that lecture. So I was like, oh, come on. But yeah, but there's this whole like way of like digital literacy and how we could use digital technologies to teach and educate students, because there's this whole like, there are various like levels of like knowledge that students can grasp from technology. And it's like super important that we, I think like kind of experiment with it, but like not go full force with it, because it could like kind of like going back to the divides that we're talking about, like kind of create that divides potentially. So there's a potential of that. Katya, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, sure. So we're
wait. Sorry. If you want to, like, do you have any thoughts about this question?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's someone comes up with something new every day with new media. Just because there's a lot of things that we've done with traditional media that can be done in a cooler, maybe more flashy way with new media, but also a more meaningful way. So yeah, like you were saying, Surya, with the VR in remote areas, that's definitely like it's really cool to put on your Google Cardboard set and like feel like you're flying across the Arctic tundra.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think a lot of those ideas are drawing from things we've done before in film, film especially. Just kind of doing it in a newer, cooler way.
Okay, I think this is like a really, really important question. I think it like basically sums up a lot of like what this discussion was. How is new media contributing to globalization? Like based off of like what we just talked of, experiences you guys had, like what do you guys see?
Why don't we define globalization maybe for audience members who don't?
I guess we could like one sentence each of us do that. I think globalization is like the spread of like a singular culture.
Yeah, so that's how I would put it.
Sure.
It's kind of like everything becoming more integrated all across the globe.
Yeah, and the export of everyone contributing to one centralized like set of ideas, norms, and essentially cultural values.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that like.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go for it, Surya.
I know you could go. Like you complete your thought. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say like in my opinion, the big way that the new media is assisting with globalization is the fact that now like distance doesn't really exist anymore, right? Like back even this Skype call, you know, one of us is in Waterloo, one of us is in Chicago, and our audience is from places all around the world, and it's like we're all sitting here together in the same room. This wasn't possible 40, 50, 60 years ago. And the fact is now we can create these spaces for the entire world to come together on one digital platform and share ideas. When you have that kind of technology, right, you can build everyone can contribute to these places, and as a result, they will like by default have a shared common culture. And this is like the first step to creating almost like a global culture where we all kind of adhere to these same standards and these same cultural values.
I think the key word like I super want to bring up is like interconnected. So everything is like dynamic and like fluid in the way like it's transmitted across like cultures, and it's starting to become even more interconnected and small, especially with like all we just talked about, like the new media, internet. Like I think the internet is like a big proponent of this and like transmitting information about various cultures to different people. I think that's like where this is like how new media is contributing to globalization. I think like social media just took that a step further.
And it's important, I think, also for us to acknowledge the parts of globalization that maybe aren't working so well. So the whole becoming interconnected comes with its own conflicts. I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on how new media works to resolve those conflicts.
New media,
a bit of a vague question. Yeah.
I don't know. I think one of new media is like truly one of these double-edged swords, because in some ways it will be so helpful for resolving these conflicts that happen in the world. Because, you know, with globalization, we have seen, you know, unequal sharing of resources. We have seen some parties benefiting more than other parties. And when we start talking about new media, this can act as like a democratizing influence to spread knowledge to as many people as possible, right? You have all these new immersive experiences with like VR and AR and like all these interactive media technologies where people can share their opinions, and we can get so much information out there as quickly as possible to say like even if globalization is failing in some regards, we have enough information to like create a fix and to collaboratively work on solutions together. The problem comes with if new media is used for the echo chambers that we were talking about before, because then it could serve as just a way for different interests and different parties to continually reinforce their own opinions. And that leads to the total breakdown of this one shared culture that we're developing through globalization, right? Because like it's about fundamentally connectedness, not divide. And we have to make sure that we're leveraging new media in order to facilitate only that connectedness.
Yeah. I think you summed like a lot of what we talked before. So yeah, and it's cool. So I think that wraps up our first section. I think that almost took us almost an hour.
Oh god.
Oh, okay. Do you guys want to wrap it up for an hour? Sorry.
Wait, do you have to leave soon or?
Yeah, I do have to leave in a bit. But I was wondering if you guys did want to wrap this up. Maybe we can leave some of this for a future discussion, or what do you guys think? Because if we start a new topic now, we might only get a few points in.
Yeah, that's true. And plus, we don't have Kevin and Wishfree, so we could probably do that later. What do you guys think? You guys want to cut this right now, or
yeah? If we have to stop at 3, I don't think we're going to be able to fully get another.
Yeah, I think this. What do you guys think? Like, I thought this was really eye-opening.
Yeah, honestly, this is enough for an entire podcast in itself.
Yeah. This is super interesting. Yeah, so we'll definitely split this up into 3 parts instead. Yeah, so I think that this wraps the first podcast out of the first 3. What do you guys think? Like, how do you guys think it went? I think it went really great.
Yeah, I haven't had much experience with podcasts, and even like putting my ideas into thoughts kind of makes me a little bit self-conscious. It's like how am I really thinking about this issue? Like, is this the way I want to represent the way I see this issue and that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
I find it's been great for me, not to be selfish or anything, but it's been a great experience.
yeah. I think I definitely learned a lot from you too. So thank you for that. Yeah, so I think we'll just end it here. I'll see how this one goes, and then like I'll like edit everything and just see how this.
We may want to like see how this goes. Like, let's look at some editing. Let's see, because I'm sure like I mean there were some points throughout this when we were getting a little bit repetitive.
Yeah,
Where,
yeah,
Yeah, maybe.
like talking about like new media and like echo chambers came up like 2 or 3 times, and then like also I feel like sometimes I don't know. This is I mean I thought the majority of this debate was like or not debate but discussion was pretty constructive. I found sometimes, at least me personally, I started lapsing into buzzwords. Like
yeah, yeah.
there was,
Yeah.
like,
A lot of this was. I think a lot of this one is like definitely buzzwords. I think AI is gonna be a lot of buzzwords. So like, if you have like anything like really eye opening, try to put it in product design maybe, because I think and like actually AI too. But yeah, I think it was good for like what we talked about.
yeah, agreed. It kind of like lent itself to that sort of subject matter.
Yeah.
But we might want to like I do feel like it can still be cut to, like the essence of what we could talked about may not take 30 minutes to still.
Yeah, I think we could like this was our first one too, so we're like experimenting with it a lot, and I'll kind of like skew the questions a bit more so we don't like. I think like you said, Robert, it was definitely repetitive. Some of the stuff we talked about, so like I'll change the questions up a bit. I'll edit them, yeah.
Yeah, but like all in all, solo, I think this was pretty good. We've got a lot of good material here. We've just got like some new experimental data to consider for next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We can even like depending on how much editing you're willing to do, Surya, we can like integrate the bits from like the best parts of our discussion with some of the interviews or like snippets that you're gonna get from Oshprit and Kevin.
Oh yeah, I think that since we're cutting this right now, where you guys want to do like a second round like today, or like what do you guys thoughts?
Would it be in one podcast?
No,
or?
we're gonna split this. We're gonna split this podcast up into 3 parts. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we could give it a bit of time.
Yeah. Okay.
To settle because yeah.
So like, what do you guys? I think we're probably. I'm just gonna have this finished in like by the 31st. Like I'm gonna release it like 20th, 27th, sometime then. So we have about a week.
Okay.
Like,
I think a week would be a good amount of time to let us think about it and then come back in future.
Do you guys want to do like? Wait, are you guys free tomorrow? Oh wait, you guys want to just cut it? We could like talk about this later.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm good unless you guys want to go over anything else.
No, just like we're just gonna. I think 2 more meetings. We'll get Ushpri and Kevin on too, and then yeah, I'll like edit it all together and put it out as podcast. But do you guys hear that?
Yeah, what is that?
I don't know. Like people are like so weird in my dorm, but yeah. Wait, did you guys hear that before too?
Wait, pardon?
I didn't hear it. No.
Oh, it's weird. Yeah, I'll mute my mic, but yeah, let's like cut this so I could like figure out what that is, and then yeah. But was that like on during the podcast? No, right?
I don't think so. I just started hearing that now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it was like light. And I was like looking back. I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" Oh wait, shit. I'll cut this part.
It's okay. It's okay. This is editable material.
Yeah, unless someone's watching us live.
I hope someone's watching us live right now.
Okay, but yeah.
Whoever's watching us live, hello.
But yeah.
Welcome.
Okay, so we'll cut this. So bye.
All right.
Yeah,
Goodbye,
good talking to you
to
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.